The Healers' Summit Hall in Ashenvale glowed with soft golden light, its high windows letting in the last rays of a fading afternoon. Delegates from every kingdom filled the rows, their voices a low hum of politics and gossip. Among them sat Elena Voss, calm and composed, dressed in the deep green robes that marked her as a master healer. Nobody in that hall could have guessed that 3 years ago she had been nothing more than a rejected mate, cast aside in front of an entire pack. Elena had not planned to attend the summit as a guest of honor. She had built her reputation quietly, treating the sick in border villages, developing remedies that other healers said were impossible. Slowly, kingdom by kingdom, her name had spread. When the invitation to speak at Ashenvale arrived, she almost declined. But something in her, some quiet strength she had earned through hardship, told her to go. She was no longer the girl who ran from a great hall in tears. She was someone new. She did not know that Damian Cross, Alpha King of the Crimson Moon Kingdom, would also be present. 3 years earlier, Damian had stood before his entire pack and rejected Elena as his mate. He had done it to secure an alliance through marriage to Seraphina, a princess from a neighboring territory whose family controlled trade routes his kingdom desperately needed. At the time, he told himself it was necessary. A king's duty was to his people, not his heart. He had watched Elena's face crumble in that moment, had seen the light leave her eyes, and had told himself the pain would fade. It never did. Not for her, and certainly not for him. The marriage to Seraphina brought exactly the kind of ruin Damian had feared he was avoiding. Within 2 years, her family broke the alliance anyway, using the marriage merely as a stepping stone to weaken Crimson Moon's borders. Seraphina left without ceremony, taking a portion of the kingdom's trade contacts with her. Damian was left with a hollow crown, a fractured court, and the growing understanding that he had thrown away something real for something that had never been real at all. He ruled through the following year in near silence, distant from his advisors, distant from his own wolves. The pack noticed the change in him. Gone was the confident young alpha who once commanded respect through sheer presence. In his place stood a king who flinched at the mention of mates and rejected bonds, who canceled meetings when the topic of marriage arose, who spent long nights walking the palace halls alone. It was one of his advisors who first mentioned Elena's rise. A traveling merchant had spoken of a healer near the eastern borders who had saved an entire village from a fever no one else could cure. When Damian heard the name Elena Voss, something in his chest tightened painfully. He asked more questions than he meant to. He learned she had built a life for herself, one that had nothing to do with him or his kingdom, and somehow, that made him ache even more. When he learned she would be speaking at the Ashenvale Summit, he did not think twice before deciding to attend. Now, sitting in the third row of the Grand Hall, Damian watched Elena take the stage to speak about combining traditional remedies with modern healing techniques. Her voice was steady and clear, carrying none of the fragile uncertainty he remembered. She spoke with authority, and the crowd listened. Pride and regret rose in him at the same time, two feelings so tangled together he could not separate them. After her talk ended and the applause faded, Damian rose from his seat before he could stop himself. He walked toward the stage as murmurs spread through the crowd. Everyone recognized the Alpha King of Crimson Moon. Whispers rippled outward as delegates realized what was unfolding before them. Elena saw him approaching and felt her heartbeat quicken, though her expression remained calm. She had imagined this moment many times over the years, always assuming it would break her if it ever came. Standing there now, watching him walk toward her with that familiar intensity in his eyes, she realized she felt something different than she expected. Not fear, not longing, just a quiet, steady strength. Damian stopped a few steps away from her, aware that every eye in the hall was fixed on them. He had planned to speak with her privately, but standing so close to her again, after 3 years of silence, the words came out before he could contain them. "Elena," he said, his voice carrying through the quiet hall. "I know I have no right to ask this of you, especially not here. But I cannot let another day pass without saying it. I was wrong to reject you. Wrong in every way a person can be wrong. I let fear and duty convince me that political gain mattered more than the bond between us, and I have paid for that mistake every day since." The hall fell utterly silent. Even the servants near the walls stopped moving. Elena stood still, studying him, searching his face for any sign of the manipulation she once knew so well from politics. She found none. Only exhaustion, regret, and something raw that looked almost like hope. "You broke that bond in front of everyone who mattered to me," Elena said quietly, though her voice reached every corner of the hall. "You did not do it in private. You made a spectacle of it, so that no one would question your choice, so that your alliance would look strong. Do you remember how many people watched me fall apart that day?" "I remember every second of it," Damien said, his throat tight. "It haunts me more than any failure I have faced as king." "Then you understand why standing here now, asking for a second chance in front of another crowd, feels like you are repeating the same mistake," Elena replied. "You built your first choice on an audience. Now you want to build your redemption on one too." Murmurs spread again through the delegates, some sympathetic to the king, others clearly moved by Elena's composure. Damien felt the weight of her words settle over him like a physical thing. She was right, and he knew it. He had spent 3 years imagining this reunion as a grand gesture that would fix everything, never once considering that grand gestures were exactly what had caused the damage in the first place. "I am not asking you to forget what happened," Damien said carefully. "I am asking for the chance to prove, through actions and time, that I have changed. I do not expect you to accept my crown or my title. I only want the chance to show you who I have become." Elena studied him for a long moment. The hall waited, breathless, caught in a story that felt larger than either of them. Finally she spoke, her voice steady and sure. "I refuse," she said simply. "Not because I do not believe you have changed, Damien. Perhaps you have. But because I built this life without you, and it is a good life. I healed myself long before you ever thought to seek me out. I do not need your crown, your apology, or your bow to feel whole. My strength came from walking away, not from you finding your way back." A ripple of surprise passed through the hall. No one expected the healer to refuse an Alpha King so plainly, especially not one offering everything he had. Damien's expression did not harden with anger, as some might have expected from a king refused in public. Instead, something in him seemed to settle, as though her words, painful as they were, brought a strange kind of clarity. He looked at her for a long moment, and then, without another word of protest, he lowered himself to one knee before her. Gasps spread through the crowd. An Alpha King did not kneel. Not to allies, not to rivals, not even to other kings. The pack hierarchy across every territory understood the weight of such an act. Yet there he was, kneeling before a healer who had just refused him in front of the most influential leaders of 5 kingdoms. "I am not asking you to accept me," Damien said, his head bowed. "I kneel because you deserve to see, in front of everyone who once watched me reject you, that I recognize your worth. That I was wrong to treat your heart as something disposable for the sake of politics. This is not for your forgiveness. It is because you deserve to witness the truth, publicly, the same way you once suffered it publicly." The silence in the hall grew heavier, thick with emotion. Elena felt tears gather at the corners of her eyes, though she refused to let them fall. She had imagined countless versions of this moment during her lonely nights of healing and rebuilding, but never once had she pictured an Alpha King kneeling before her with such quiet humility, asking for nothing in return. She let the silence stretch, allowing the moment to breathe, allowing herself to feel it fully instead of pushing it away as she once might have. "Rise, Damien," she finally said, her voice softer now, though still firm. "Kneeling does not erase what happened. It does not rebuild trust in a single moment. But I see what this costs you, and I understand what you are trying to say." Damien rose slowly, meeting her eyes. "Then let me try," he said. "Not as your king, not as someone above you, as someone willing to earn back what he threw away." Elena took a slow breath, weighing his words against the years of pain and growth that had shaped her. She was no longer the same person who once needed his approval to feel valued. Whatever answer she gave now would be hers alone, built on her own terms. "If you want a second chance," she said, "it will not look like grand gestures in crowded halls. It will look like small, consistent choices, made when no one is watching. You will not lead, and I will not follow. We will walk as equals. or we will not walk at all. Damien nodded, understanding settling over him like a long-awaited relief. Then I accept your terms. Elena allowed the smallest smile to touch her lips, not one of forgiveness rushed too soon, but one that hinted at possibility. She turned then, gathering her notes from the podium, and began walking down the aisle between the stunned delegates. Damien did not rush to walk beside her. He followed a respectful distance behind, understanding at last that some things could not be commanded, only earned. The delegates watched them go, whispers already spreading of the story that would travel far beyond the walls of Ashenvale. The Alpha King, who had once rejected his mate for power, had knelt before her in front of the same kind of crowd, not to reclaim her, but to acknowledge what he had lost. Outside, the evening air was cool and quiet. Elena paused at the top of the stone steps, looking out over the city lights beginning to flicker on in the distance. Damien stopped a few paces behind her, giving her the space she had asked for. "Thank you," she said, without turning around, "for understanding that this is not the ending you imagined." "It is not an ending at all," Damien replied. "It is only a beginning, if you allow it to be." Elena finally turned to face him, studying the sincerity in his expression one last time before starting down the steps. "Then we will see," she said, "what kind of man you have truly become." She walked into the city ahead of him, her steps steady and sure, carrying the strength of everything she had built alone. Damien followed at a distance, no longer a king expecting devotion, but a man willing to prove himself through patience and time. Behind them, the story of the Alpha King who bowed before his rejected mate spread through the kingdoms like wildfire, but neither Elena nor Damien paid attention to the whispers that followed. What mattered now was not the legend forming around them, but the quiet, uncertain path forward, walked one honest step at a time.